Hey everybody, my name is Jason Major, and I'm here with Biblical Cinematic Universe to review the 1927 film King of Kings, directed by Cecil B. DeMille. Cecil B. DeMille, of course, directed the Ten Commandments, starring Charlton Heston. He also did a 1920s version of that, and this is silent film, of course, is about the life of Jesus. Has nothing to do with the one that came later in the 60s that was directed by someone else and starred Jeffrey Hunter either. So let's get early into it because this is a really interesting bit of film history, and I'm going to be sharing a lot of what this film says. So the first title card says, "He himself commanded that his message be carried out to the uttermost parts of the earth. May this portrayal play a reverent part in the spirit of that great command." So this film has a reverence to the Gospels, a reverence to the divinity of Jesus. Jesus is definitely shown as a supernatural, fully Son of God, fully man as well. Also, what's an interesting thing about this movie is that he is taking the life of Christ, and he's taking the Gospels and kind of putting them in different positions. Like, some stories will be in different places than they are in the Gospel, or verses will be in the Gospels. But it's to make a point, and it is to emphasize the divinity of Jesus and what his mission is here on earth. The movie starts with in red tint. So back in the day, silent films, if you don't know, silent films were played originally with live organ music, and then later like they had a music track over like the thing, and then obviously later they developed the ability to show the people talking. But in this version that I saw, which was on Tubi in 2025. It starts off with in red tint, which means that they tint it just with one color, red, and like you get the reds pop up, right? And so, the beginning of the film is actually interesting because it starts off with Mary Magdalene, and she's a woman of the court, but she's more like Jezebel from the Samson Delilah story, meaning that she's a powerful woman of the court. She is a harlot, but a powerful harlot. So you see these kind of people partying, and there's a use of different animals like monkeys and tigers and stuff like this. This is obviously not in the gospel, but it's a great scene. And even these people who are partying are kind of laughing and mocking. They're admitting and telling Mary Magdalene about this guy named Jesus who is doing these miracles, which is really interesting. So Mary Magdalene is kind of upset that Judas is missing, who apparently was his boyfriend, or her boyfriend, I guess. That's interesting. And so she's like, "Oh, it's another woman, isn't it?" And then what ends up happening is that she says that she goes after to go to find Jesus. Meanwhile, you have then afterwards you see Jesus is already in ministry to the poor. Biblical text Mark 2 is quoted, and we are introduced to Mark, who is just a young boy in this, who is healed, who is a cripple. And then we see this little girl who's blind, and the little girl who is blind is taken to Jesus, and that is the first introduction to Jesus. And actually, she's taken first to Mother Mary first, and then she is taken to Jesus. And then that is the first time we see Jesus, is when she says, "I can see the light." And Jesus' first words is, "I've come as a light to the world." And then we see Jesus, his face, which was really a powerful way of just showing Jesus. Then Mary Magdalene comes to Jesus, and Mary Magdalene says, "Hey, Jesus, she basically goes to tell off Jesus, and then with one look, she kind of looks at Jesus and kind of like, you can see like all her sin is exposed, and then Jesus basically says, "Come out." And then all using this clever, like, because 1927, it was, special effects back then, they use this kind of like way of using footage where we see like 7 different people who are hanging on her, who are representing the seven deadly sins. And it's just kind of cool. Like they're the seven deadly sins, and and then Jesus goes like, "Come out of her," and then she's just like completely transformed, and then covers herself up, and then she's a completely different woman for the rest of the movie. That was a powerful scene in the movie. We see the chief priest in this movie. We see a lot of scripture stories. Another scripture story that I thought was fun to see was like when they're trying to get they're trying to find a coin for the temple tax, and you see from the Bible story, you see Peter fishing, and then the soldiers see him fishing, and they're kind of like, "Oh, I wonder if that'll work for us." That was kind of fun. So you see that scene. You see Jesus in that scene, and he's standing next to a cross, and he sees the shadow of the cross. I thought that was cool. And then they show the little children. Jesus fixes a little girl's doll is broken, and then Jesus he fixes, and the leg is off, and then Jesus fixes the leg of the doll. That was kind of a little nice scene of showing Jesus with the children. And then we see Mary and Lazarus, and Jesus is the resurrection of life. We see the woman caught in adultery, and then when he writes in the sand, it's the sins of the person that's accusing him. For example, if a person's accusing him, he's writing in the sand actually thief or murderer of what is in their heart, and then they stop. That was kind of cool. Like I said, there's a lot of different scriptures here. Jesus is the way, the truth, the life. You see the Palm Sunday is after the scene of the cleansing of the temple in this version. Judas wants to crown Jesus as king right there. And that is when they actually do the temptation of the devil, which in the Bible, of course, was after the baptism. But in this one, it's actually in Jerusalem with Jesus. Judas wants to crown him as king, and the devil's like, tempts him with that idea of like, you could become king, and Jesus rebukes him at that point. At that point, afterwards, you see a little lamb wandering around the temple, and Jesus puts it in his arms. That was a clever image as well. We go to the Last Supper. And a lot of these scenes are like repainting paintings. So, for example, like even with this one scene where it was like the high priest is giving money to Judas, and you hear clink, 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 and these coins being dropped. That was kind of a cool image as well. This is an awesome movie. I'm just covering just some of the example scenes in this movie that you would see. When you see the Last Supper, it looks like a painting. Also, after they leave, Peter just sort of puts the cup down, and you see like an image of a dove come in. That was kind of a cool image. We see Jesus in Gethsemane praying. We see the betrayal, of course. We see them lead him to Caiaphas, and they use different gospels to tell the different parts of the story. So they're putting this in like an order that's consistent for the story, which was really well done. Claudia is in this movie, the flogging of Jesus, and there's beautiful orchestra music. We see the soldiers mocking Jesus, of course, and we see up to the crucifixion of Jesus, Pilate washing his hands, Calvary. Calvary was really cool because with the Calvary scene, there was like darkness in the land, but then there's like a giant earthquake. Like there's a powerful giant earthquake which like takes people's lives and stuff. That was kind of cool. It was a big cool special effects for the era of the 1920s. When we get into now Jesus has died, and when we get to the resurrection, again, there is red tint for a few minutes in the version that I saw, so that you see the soldiers, they're kind of guarding the tomb. And something I don't see in a lot of Jesus movies is you see the soldiers guarding the tomb, and Jesus busting out of the tomb, and with bright light, and then he comes out, walks out of the tomb himself. That was cool. I hope Mel Gibson does that in his film, Resurrection of Christ. That was a really cool. And then after Mary Magdalene sees him, then it goes back to black and white for the final scene, which Jesus appears to his disciples. This film, I can't give it anything less than a 10 out of 10. You'd have to like silent films, but it was awesome. I thought H.B. Warner, who plays Jesus, fun fact, he played Mr. Gower in It's in a Wonderful Life, who was the druggist who, that was George Bailey's first job, right? So it's like a complete different from this. But he actually is very warm and friendly, and but he plays Jesus the way I would feel like the way that, yes, from the 1920s, that had been the traditional Jesus that you would see like in paintings and like in pictures and stuff. But he's still warm and friendly, but he's supernaturally divine, and that's what I thought it was wonderful though. This film is excellent in the way that it narratively weaves the entire story of the gospel, and that's what I really like about this movie. No, I highly recommend it. 10 out of 10. Take care.